As I grew older, I realized that life would be a journey filled with obstacles and unexpected turns. My father instilled in me the importance of perseverance, a trait that would become essential in the future. Early on, I understood that dedication and unwavering focus could be the key elements separating success from failure. When I started my professional career, these lessons influenced every choice I made, especially when I entered the demanding world of the chemical supply industry. Before long, I was leading teams, balancing family obligations, and managing the demands of a career that required constant energy. I took on these challenges, but they came with hidden costs, particularly when it came to spending time with my family. The balance between my work and home life became a delicate act, especially as new career opportunities brought added responsibilities. One Friday night, I was in my office, reviewing applications from hopeful candidates for upcoming roles in our department. As the regional head of a chemical supply company that specialized in soil enhancers, fertilizers, and weed control products, I knew that our success was closely tied to the farming community we served. With the growing emphasis on sustainable practices, our company prided itself on being a leader, ensuring that our products met the strictest environmental safety standards. 2 members of my office staff were leaving due to their husbands' recent promotions, which meant they would be relocating within the next 3 months. The urgency to find replacements was high. Our sales team covered 8 states in the heart of flyover country, and this year's sales growth had surpassed projections. Kathy, my executive assistant, peeked into my office and said, "Ed, all 8 candidates have confirmed their interview slots for Monday. I'm heading out now, so good night." Every Thursday, I traveled to one of the states in my region to conduct a half-day sales meeting on Friday before heading back home. This meant that Thursday evenings had become my wife's night to go out with her friends. Over the years, this routine had resulted in significant expenses for babysitting. My weekly visits gave our sales representatives important face-to-face support to address work-related issues and improve their performance. Over time, this approach had proven very effective. In 8 years, I hadn't lost a single team member, which was considered a significant achievement in the company. Today, I managed to return just in time to review a few tasks before heading home. For years, the company had been urging me to give up this part of my role. However, I cherished the time alone, which allowed me to reflect in my own way. With a wife who always had advice to share and 3 kids at home, the peaceful time I spent driving was invaluable. Additionally, it saved our branch the cost of hiring a sales manager. I had consistently kept expenses under budget and intended to keep it that way. With all of our children now in junior and senior high school, and my oldest daughter, my pride and joy, preparing to graduate and start college at Southeast Missouri University in the fall, things were looking good for our family. She had earned a full scholarship provided by my employer. My youngest daughter had just turned 16 and was busy studying for her learner's permit. Grace, my wife of 20 years, had been the executive assistant to the district attorney since a year before our youngest was born. He had just been offered a new job as a lawyer for the federal government and had accepted it. The authorities seemed to appreciate his straightforward, no-nonsense approach. Turning it down would have been foolish, as it paid twice as much. He would be starting in 4 months. I never could quite figure him out. He was around my age, yet he had never married. I wasn't sure, but despite the rumors, I didn't believe he was not straight. Every second weekend of the month for the past 15 years, my parents would pick up my 3 children to give my wife and me some quality time together. When they first started this, my wife and I were at a critical point in our marriage. My parents believed we needed private time without the kids around. I have to admit it was the best gift they could have given us because it allowed my wife and me the time to reconnect. Without their help, we might have become another divorce statistic. We only had about 3 months left before this would end, as Amy, my oldest, would be working in our senator's office in Washington over the summer before starting her post-secondary studies in political science. A while ago, my dad, on a whim, bought each of my 3 children a kit from Ancestry.com with my approval and sent them in as a lighthearted experiment. According to the instructions, there would only be a match if someone related had also submitted their DNA to the program. My children discussed it with me, and I gave them the green light, saying that everyone has distant relatives they don't remember or know. Maybe it would lead to a new adventure for all of us. Amy suggested we keep it a surprise for their mother until we received the results. We knew it might take 5 or 6 months to get an answer. This weekend, we were headed to Nashville to see the Grand Ole Opry and planned to be back on Sunday. My wife had arranged this special trip to create another cherished memory for us. I met my wife, Grace, during my last year of university at a football game. No, I wasn't one of the players on the field. I was one of the overlooked workers selling food at inflated prices to the crowd. She was one of the medical coach's youngest daughters and always had access to free tickets. That day, she got into an argument with her date over something trivial that one of them misunderstood. One thing led to another, and I got caught in the middle. She pushed him and stepped aside, and he didn't see her move, hitting me from behind with full force. I tumbled down the concrete steps, my food tray flying. The next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital with my head bandaged. The doctor told me I had 25 stitches due to a split forehead. Grace must have felt guilty because she visited me every day to make sure I was okay. She met my entire family before I even regained consciousness. I was later told that I had been in a coma for nearly a week due to internal injuries. As my vision began to clear, I saw an unfamiliar woman standing before me, radiant like a goddess. At first, I thought I had arrived at the gates of heaven and that she was my guardian angel. Then, I recognized my girlfriend, Esmeralda, standing beside her, looking unimpressed by the vision next to her. I closed my eyes and drifted back to sleep, hoping that when I woke up, Esmeralda would be gone and that this was just a dream. When I awoke, the scene was still the same, but Esmeralda was no longer there. She had decided to move on and find someone new to shower her with affection. It felt like my prayer had been answered. Grace stayed by my side, asking for nothing as I slowly rebuilt my life. I never asked for it, but we ended up dating. One thing led to another, and after graduation, I went into sales, and she secured her first job as an executive assistant. During a family gathering, her little cousin asked why she wasn't married yet, and she replied, "Because Ed hasn't asked me." 3 months later, I stood at the altar watching Grace walk toward me like a goddess. She was 5'8" with long blonde hair, deep blue, almost black eyes, and a figure that turned heads. We got married, but by our 5th year, we had reached a point where we were both ready to walk away. To this day, I don't understand what drove us apart, nor did she, as far as I knew. We had just left Lambert's on our way home. To me, it was a restaurant surviving on its reputation. The main attraction was the servers tossing large buns across the room for customers to catch, but the rest of the food was outdated and overcooked. We stopped there because it reminded my wife of her mother's home cooking. That's all I need to say. Out of the blue, my wife reached over and turned off the sound system. This move meant she had something serious to discuss. I reached into my jacket pocket and turned on my voice recorder, a habit I had when I wanted to document private conversations that might need verification later. "Ed," my wife Grace asked, "have you ever thought about having an affair?" My first thought was, where is this coming from? My next was, why is she asking this? Was she having one, or did she know someone who was? Why did she feel it was important to bring this up now? I pushed these questions aside before speaking. "Grace, let's be honest," I said. "Everyone has thought about having an affair at some point. The better question is, have I ever acted on it?" And the answer is no. "Why not?" she asked. "Because when I said my vows on our wedding day," I said, "they meant something to me, and they still do." "With society's changing views," Grace said, "marriage vows don't hold the same value they once did. I think you should let go of that mindset and consider finding a female companion you're compatible with. If guilt is what holds you back, think of this as my permission. You have my unconditional blessing to go ahead. It might even help you appreciate our relationship more and deepen your understanding of who we are together. That way you can experience the full value and joy of a relationship with someone else without any burden of guilt." I had an issue with her new perspective because it implied that using others for personal pleasure and gain was acceptable to her. For me, it wasn't. This was a side of her I had never seen, and it made me reconsider things significantly. "Answer me this, my loving wife," I said. "Why is it so important for you that I have an open affair with your approval? Have I done something so awful that you are looking for an excuse to end our marriage?" After 5 minutes of silence, I turned the sound system back on. Her lack of response spoke volumes. Grace always had an answer for everything, but now she was silent. I wondered why. I now believed there was definitely a reason my wife wanted me to have an affair. But what was it? Regardless of the reason, I was convinced that something was seriously wrong in our life. I knew I needed to find out what. I drove for another hour, and we were about 40 miles from home when I saw her reach over and turn off the sound again. I reached into my jacket and turned the recorder back on. "I'm sorry, Ed," Grace said. "I guess I've been reading too many Harlequin romance novels. Those ideas must have come out of nowhere." With that, she turned the sound system back on, thinking that was the end of the conversation. The problem was that our 3 kids and I all knew she disliked those books because they had been her mother's favorite. Grace had always called them trashy and considered herself above them. Whenever her mother passed the latest ones to her, Grace brought them home and threw them away. As I drove the last 40 miles, I realized the only thing I didn't know much about was her Thursday night outings with her friends. It had never seemed important enough to worry about. On the rare occasions I was home, she gladly adjusted her plans to stay in with me. Until now, I had no reason to question those nights because I trusted her completely. But after our conversation, I now had a reason to wonder what those girls' nights out were really about. Was she bar hopping with her friends and possibly forming questionable connections, even one-night stands? By the time we got home, I knew I had to find out what was going on during her nights out. We pulled into the driveway just as my parents arrived with our kids. Once inside, I made my parents a rye and Coke while they told me about their weekend with the kids. For my parents, spending quality time with their grandchildren was priceless. They believed the grandchildren kept them young and updated. Each activity was tailored to what the kids wanted, exposing my parents to new cultural experiences. They stayed for about an hour before heading home. I walked them to their car. "Ed," my dad said quietly, "when would be a good time for us to drop by your office tomorrow for a private chat?" "I have job interviews all day," I replied. "How about around 3 o'clock? Whatever it is, I'm here for you." "It's not about your mom and me," my dad whispered. "It's something involving your wife and her youngest daughter. I shouldn't say more, as she's watching us." "All right, Dad, I'll come over after work, and we should be able to sort it out in half an hour," I said loudly enough for Grace to hear through the window. After watching them leave, I went back inside, grabbed my car keys, and put my toolbox in the trunk. "Hey, honey," I said, "I need to stop by Dad's tomorrow to fix something after work, so I might be a little late." "I heard you from the window," Grace said. "Don't worry, we can have dinner a bit later." My dad arrived exactly on time with my mom, and they were shown into my office. Once seated, we waited for one of the staff members to bring us coffee. After it was served, Kathy shut the office door on her way out. "Ed," my dad started, "I deeply regret the foolish decision to send in our grandchildren's DNA. They found a match for April. She has a grandmother on her father's side who is searching for her son and his descendants." With that, he handed me a document from Ancestry.com, which included a woman's name and phone number. I felt devastated. Just from my expression, my dad could tell how hard the news had hit me. "Dad, I don't think this is a mistake. So let's see what we can find out," I said. Using the office phone, I dialed the number, enabling both the recording and speaker functions to ensure I had a permanent record of the conversation. After 2 rings, the call was answered. "My name is Edward Paul Adams, and I'm looking for Mrs. Beatrice Smith regarding a DNA match found through Ancestry.com, I said. "May I speak with her, please?" "You're speaking to her, young man," the woman replied. "How can I help you?" "It's complicated," I admitted. "To put it briefly, I just found out that my youngest daughter is your granddaughter." "Are you talking about April Marie Adams?" she asked. "Yes, I am," I confirmed. "Then you might know my son, whom I had to give up for adoption when I was just 15, she said. "I might, if I knew his name," I responded. "He was adopted by a family named Barrow. His given names were Luke Robert," Mrs. Smith revealed. My face went pale, and my parents' eyes filled with tears as we all recognized the name. Her candid statement had just turned into a nightmare for me. "He's alive and well," I said. "He's currently the district attorney here in Cape Girardeau County, Missouri. He's also my wife's boss. I think I now understand why he never married." "He's my only child," she said. "I have stage 4 lung cancer and don't have much time left. Would you let April visit me before I pass? If needed, I'm willing to pay for her ticket. I'd like to meet her so I can ensure she receives my estate. Mrs. Smith, given the circumstances, I'll have you coordinate with my parents. Since you're only 1 state away, they can take her on a special weekend trip so you can meet her," I said. "I don't think I'd let my daughter make this trip alone. Is there anything else you need from me?" "Have a notary prepare a statement allowing my lawyer to conduct a DNA test," Mrs. Smith said. "Because of the value of April's inheritance, he'll need confirmation before changing my will." "No problem. I'll hand this call over to my dad now," I said. "He can handle the arrangements and get directions." I stood up, left my office, and handed Kathy my personal recorder. "Get this conversation and the phone call that's still recording transcribed and notarized. I'll need them ready for divorce court." "Do you want me to prepare the authorization for the DNA test as well?" Kathy asked. Kathy was sharp and knew that when I turned on the recorder, She was to discreetly listen in. This method had helped resolve many issues in the past. "Yes," I said, "but we need to keep it quiet for a few weeks. I need to find out what my soon-to-be ex-wife has been doing on her Thursday nights." I stepped into my assistant's office and said, "David, I need to speak with you and your wife as soon as possible. I'll need both of your cooperation for a personal matter." David looked at me and immediately knew that whatever I needed was serious. "She should be finishing her dispatching shift soon," David said. "I'll text her to come over right away." I returned to my office and we finalized the plan. Using the house key they had for my place, they would pack clothes for April and head out next Friday. I would have her taken out of school and dropped off at their house by 10 o'clock. I was seeing my parents out when David's wife arrived. I asked her to go into his office and I joined them shortly after. Thanks to modern technology, Kathy had already transcribed and prepared copies. I handed a copy to David and Cheryl and suggested they start by reading the conversation between my wife and me. I also gave Kathy the document my dad had given me so she could make photocopies for my lawyer's file, which we were now assembling, and asked her to find the best attorney for the situation. Both Cheryl and David had known my wife and me for years, and they were visibly shaken by what they had just learned. Cheryl and Grace had grown up as neighbors. Although they weren't particularly close, they knew each other well. The reality of today's revelations shocked Cheryl. "Do you think it's possible they're still involved after all this time?" Cheryl asked. "Or could it have been a situation where they got caught up in something and later regretted it?" "I'm not sure, but I'll need both of your help to find out," I said. "For the next few weeks, David, I need you to take my company car on the sales trips. Cheryl, I'll need to drive your car since no one will recognize it. This means you'll need to drive David's car. I'll inform the company that this is part of your cross-training, David, so you'll be doing this for the next 3 months. You're planning to follow your wife on Thursday nights and document what you find," David said. "She'll still believe you're away on your usual trips. My gut tells me this is still happening. Because why else would she suddenly suggest that I have an affair with her approval?" I said. "If Barrow wasn't changing jobs, nothing would have shifted. I think Grace may be planning to move with Luke Robert Barrow when he starts working in St. Louis. If she can prove I had an affair, it would justify her filing for divorce." "Wow," Cheryl said. "I can absolutely see Grace doing something like that. In today's world, it's common to accuse someone of something you've already done yourself. It's an effective way to divert attention from your own actions." "Ed, if you find evidence on one of those Thursday nights," Cheryl said, "call me, and I'll have dispatch send a couple of officers to visit her and her lover, saying you've been in a car accident. That way, I can get you a detailed police report about their state of dress or undress and where they were found. Some officers would love to get some payback on the district attorney for how he's treated them in the past." Kathy stepped in and said, "Dale Allen Britton left the district attorney's office 4 months ago because he couldn't work for him anymore. He started his own practice. I faxed him everything we've gathered so far, and he's waiting for you. You should go." "Ed, send my love and best wishes to Dale," Cheryl said. "Tell him we still miss him." I headed out to meet the man now preparing to go to the Supreme Court over the woman's right-to-life case regarding Roe v. Wade. His unique approach to the law had been turning everything he touched on its head. Things started to come into focus. Grace and I began having issues in our marriage right after she started working for Luke Barrow. That was around the time I was promoted to sales manager and began my 24-hour turnaround trips for sales meetings. If they were still involved every Thursday night, I'd unknowingly been the fool for over 15 years. They must have been laughing behind my back. Now, the expensive Christmas and birthday gifts from Luke to Grace made sense. Dale was waiting when I arrived. Cheryl had already informed him about our plans. Dale even handed me a key to Luke Barrow's house and the code to override the alarm system if needed. He also gave me a slip of paper with a phone number, explaining it belonged to someone who could provide services at a reasonable cost. He mentioned that he had already contacted them, and they were expecting my call. He shared that his background on the streets meant he still had the right connections to make things happen. The codes for Barrow's house would be valid until the end of next week when Barrow would get his regular reminder to update his security. Dale planned to sue Barrow for child support dating back to April's birth, which would be financially devastating for him. Under state law, child support debt couldn't be wiped out through bankruptcy. Dale intended to sue Grace for adultery, marital abandonment, and fraud for knowingly passing off Barrow's daughter as mine. He suggested I temporarily transfer my parental rights for April to my parents until the court case was settled. When I asked why, he explained, "This way they can't claim you're using April as leverage against them. I know Luke will come after you as harshly as possible. He'll treat you just like he's treated others, throwing the book at them for minor offenses. Sometimes the best defense is a strong offense." I offered to use my debit card for a down payment on Dale's services, but he advised against it, saying my wife would notice the transaction right away and might catch on. He suggested I write a check instead, which he would hold until after they were served. As I left, I realized his strategic thinking was designed to give me the upper hand and time to uncover the truth. Kathy had indeed found me the best attorney for the job. I also sensed that Dale had his own reasons for targeting Luke Barrow as fiercely as he was. Both Grace and Luke were about to face a storm they could never have anticipated. Dale Britton had effectively set his own plan in motion. I signed all the necessary documents so that my parents would have temporary parental rights over April starting Friday and gave them a copy. Once Dale and I explained everything to them, they agreed it made sense. I was waiting for Cheryl to arrive in her old 2002 Ford Taurus. David had already left for his first sales trip, and Cheryl would leave her car with me and drive David's home. My oldest had informed me that their mother wouldn't be home for dinner, as she planned to meet her friends after work. As soon as Cheryl arrived, we made the switch, and I loaded my suitcase into the trunk. "Ed," Cheryl said, "dispatch and all the officers are on board. Just tell me where." "Thanks," I replied. "Dale said to call him when we're ready so he can serve them personally." "I'm curious why Dale is so eager to take down Luke Barrow." "For Dale, it's about principle," Cheryl explained. "Luke doesn't stand behind his word." It was interesting to watch Grace and Luke leave separately, only to meet at Charlie's Bar and Grill for a steak dinner. Afterward, they parted ways temporarily. I positioned myself near Luke Barrow's house and waited. Dale's connections, now my team, were prepared, and I had a clear view of Luke's home. Grace arrived first. She entered the code to disable the alarm and used her key to unlock the door. We filmed her just long enough to confirm her entrance. About 10 minutes later, Luke drove up, and Grace opened the door for him. Her blouse was fully unbuttoned, and she wasn't wearing a bra, revealing her cleavage. Luke embraced Grace and gave her a deep kiss, his hands moving to touch her chest. I stopped recording as they closed the door. 6 of the 8 rooms in Luke's house were wired with video and audio. We were using the neighbor's house as a base, thanks to their son, who was serving time and agreed to let us use the space. Everything happening in Barrow's house was being streamed live to any Facebook pages they were associated with. We learned they had a team following my car, expecting that I would take the bait and look for a new romantic interest. Grace knew my schedule well, so they had planted a woman who matched my type. I texted Cheryl about what I had overheard. She called David to inform him that he was being watched. Being a former Marine, David took immediate action and safely drove off the road at 10 p.m., calling for a tow truck afterward. David reported the accident to Cheryl, who then texted me. I gave the go-ahead and provided the address. While waiting, I went to Barrow's house and removed the valves from their car tires, ensuring they couldn't leave or clean up their mess anytime soon. Soon, police officers arrived, lights flashing, and knocked on the door, asking for Grace Adams. Luke tried to deny her presence until the officers pointed out that her car was in the driveway. Grace finally appeared at the door, wrapped only in a bedsheet. "Mrs. Grace Adams, your husband Edward Paul's car was involved in a motor vehicle accident just outside Little Rock, Arkansas. Your parents suggested we check for you here when you couldn't be reached." I felt a sense of satisfaction watching Grace's face turn pale. The police officer had intentionally misled her to make both her and Luke uncomfortable. Once the officers left, I followed their car at a short distance. From the time the police arrived until they departed, everything had been recorded and streamed live on Facebook. We now had solid proof of the ongoing affair, and so did the residents of Cape. Around midnight, my oldest daughter Amy called and said, "Dad, Mom isn't home yet and my calls are going to voicemail. I'm worried she's never this late. What should I do?" "Call Luke Barrow's cell and ask him to put your mother on the line," I said, texting her his number. "What does her boss have to do with this?" Amy asked. "He's been her Thursday night boyfriend for over 16 years, I replied. I hung up and sent Amy a clip from a burner phone showing Grace in a bedsheet speaking to the police, while Luke stood nearby in just pajama bottoms. 10 minutes later, Amy called back and said, "Mom's phone suddenly started working. She called and said she's on Lower East Broadway with 4 flat tires." I knew she was lying and said that couldn't be true because it's nowhere near Luke Barrow's place. She insisted she was telling the truth. So I told her I saw the video of her and her lover talking to the police. She asked, "What clip?" So I sent it to her. Mom couldn't explain why she was wrapped in a bedsheet. "I don't think she'll be home for a while, but could you do me a favor and open the front door?" I asked. As I got out of the car, Amy spotted me. She watched as I took my suitcase from the trunk and walked toward her. Just as I set the suitcase down, my phone rang. It was Dale Allen Britton. I answered and put the call on speaker. Ed, I just served them both at his house, Dale said. Your wife and her lover are now barred from coming within 500 feet of you or any of your children. I'll notify the Cape Police Department before heading home. Don't talk to her at all, Dale advised. If she shows up, even to collect her belongings, call the police. Understood, and so does my oldest daughter, I said. Thanks, Dale. Amy, could you open the garage so I can park Cheryl's car inside? I asked. I'm supposed to be in Little Rock. We did just that. Dad, is that why the locksmith came around 6 to change the locks? Amy asked. Yes, it was a last-minute decision, I replied. Kathy arranged it when it became clear that things would unfold as planned. What started all this? Amy asked. The DNA test your grandfather sent to Ancestry.com, I said. They found a match for April. He told me about it at work on Monday. When I contacted the woman, we learned that your mother's boss is her son, whom she gave up for adoption when she was 15. Amy broke down, and I held her until she calmed down. We dimmed the lights and went into the kitchen to talk quietly. I turned on my voice recorder and played the conversation her mother and I had on the drive back from Nashville. Hearing her mother's words in her own voice was eye-opening. Why would Mom want you to have an affair, Dad? Amy asked. To lessen the impact of her own if it was ever discovered, I said. It's ironic that her suggestion is what led to the truth coming out. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Since I wasn't supposed to be home, Amy answered. It was a police officer who informed us that they had stopped a taxi with Grace in it and told her she would be violating a court order if she went any further. My oldest daughter and I spent the night discussing everything. We both came to the conclusion that Grace should have been a writer, given how many stories she'd told about her girls' nights out. I still can't believe Mom has had an ongoing affair with the same man for over 16 years, Amy said. How did we not see it? It was simple, I replied. You kids were young, and I was always traveling as the sales manager with weekly meetings in different states. I trusted her and our relationship enough to not question her having a night out with friends. We all trusted her, Amy said. That's why we were blind to what was happening behind the scenes. I sat there in shock. Until Amy said it, I hadn't realized it. Grace had used the trust we had in her to carry on the affair for so long. Amy saw the tears in my eyes and said, That's what hurts the most. It's not the affair or the lies. It's realizing that she used our trust as a tool to keep the only relationship that really mattered to her. If your mother could do that to people she claimed to love, I said, imagine what she'll do to us when she starts resenting us for what she's about to go through. Amy got up to make fresh coffee, and I noticed the first light of dawn. My phone buzzed with a text notification. It's from your mother, I said. She wants to talk as soon as possible. Says there's an issue with our oldest that needs discussing before I get back from my trip. How are you going to respond? Amy asked, worried. Don't worry, be happy. You and Luke can still laugh about the big doofus behind my back, I said as I typed. You can still move to St. Louis with Luke Barrow as you planned all along, just not with the kids. Amy looked at me, shocked. Your mother didn't need me anymore, I said. I had served my purpose. She wanted me to start an affair so she could use it against me in divorce court. She never imagined she'd get caught after all this time. It must have been hard for Amy to hear what I texted her mother. Most people can't face raw truth. They lash out at whoever reveals it. But over time, acceptance comes. I took Amy into my arms as she started to cry again. We managed to calm her down just as we heard Eric and April waking up. I turned on the kitchen TV to KVO S12 to watch the morning news, as I usually did. Before long, they joined us for breakfast, surprised to see me home. We were all taken aback when my wife's image appeared on the screen. My son turned up the volume out of curiosity. My heart sank for my kids when I heard Luke and Grace talking about me. Grace said plainly, "The doofus is such a moron, he's blind to everything happening around him." Their mother then made a sarcastic comment about me that made them both burst into laughter. Then the reporter spoke. "I don't think they're laughing anymore," he said. After 5 hours of live streaming their long-term affair on Facebook, their plan to set Edward Adams up with a professional escort so Grace could divorce him and take everything has completely backfired. The next scene showed Dale serving both Grace and Luke with lawsuits. The news reporter detailed the nature of the lawsuits. April ran to me and sat on my lap, sobbing. It was a devastating way for a 16-year-old to find out that her father wasn't her biological father, but rather her mother's long-term lover was. Eric summed it up when he said, "If you're just a joke to Mom, what does that make the rest of us?" After April calmed down, Amy and I explained everything that had happened since their mother and I began our return from Nashville. I called their school to excuse them from classes on Friday and Monday, allowing time to process and handle their emotions. We were about to start breakfast when April said, "Dad, the police chief is on TV." We turned the volume up. The announcement confirmed that both Grace Adams and District Attorney Luke Barrow were now under a criminal investigation. A special task force from across the county had been assembled to lead the case. I thought to myself that when someone's behavior becomes public knowledge, society often reacts harshly, despite privately tolerating similar actions. Hypocrisy is woven into our everyday lives. After breakfast and tidying up, I had my 3 children sit down at the table. I showed them each a copy of the letter my dad had received. "April, my parents are going to take you to meet your biological father's mother. She's dying of cancer and has asked to see you. There's a significant reason for this, but I think it's best that she explains it herself. To me, you are and will always be my daughter. If you have any questions, ask your grandparents." "Amy, could you help your sister pack for the weekend while I call my parents?" I asked. As the girls left, my son said, "How are you holding up, Dad?" "I'm not," I admitted. "I'm fighting every moment to stay in control. Remember, if you ever go through something like this, as a father, you have to stay strong for everyone else." I called my parents and explained the situation. They said they'd come over as soon as they finished packing the car and had about an hour before their flight. I didn't realize it then, but at that moment, my relationship with my son changed for the better, forever. The 3 of us watched as the daughter I had raised left with my parents to meet her biological grandmother for the first time. I prayed it would go well and that she would return feeling the same about me. At the district attorney's office, the atmosphere was grim. Grace had gone out to buy new clothes after her car had been towed and the tire valves replaced. Luke Barrow was reading the lawsuit against him. Although there wasn't a direct DNA sample, the biological evidence was linked in a way that left no doubt about his paternity. Everyone in the office now knew about their relationship and the long-standing affair, as well as the hidden truth of April Adams's parentage. It was turning into a political disaster. The legal definition of fraud had expanded over time to include failing to disclose relevant facts, and Dale was suing both Grace and Luke for that in a civil case. It was becoming clearer that they had been deceiving Ed for years. Every lawyer Luke contacted confirmed that Ed Adams and Dale Britton were likely to win. None of them wanted to be involved, as many had already heard about Dale's reputation as a formidable opponent. They pointed out that typical defense strategies rely on presenting facts in a pattern that could be argued, but with Dale, many found themselves defenseless by the time he finished his case. The Facebook exposure of Grace and Luke's behavior, along with their open admission of plotting to ruin an honest man to take his assets and live together, might not have meant much on its own. However, given Luke's status in the community, it had become front-page news. Grace had just left her favorite store, known for its high quality and unique clothing. She was shocked when a woman approached her, asking if she was out of her mind for not realizing things would end badly. When Grace questioned what she meant, the woman told her she'd been an XX star on Facebook for at least 5 hours. Grace returned to Luke's house around 1 p.m. to find a company just wrapping up a service call. They assumed she was the homeowner and advised her and her husband to reset all the security codes in the house. It was only after they left that she realized she hadn't been asked for an electronic signature to confirm the visit. She called Luke, wanting to know who might have orchestrated this to prevent him from securing his new position in St. Louis. When Luke asked why, she explained what she'd walked into, and they began to suspect that Ed's actions were more than just self-defense. They knew that Luke's new job was a politically connected appointment from influential figures. With a coffee in hand, Grace sat down to read the divorce petition. The first shock came when she realized it was her own words to Ed that had made him suspicious. Words about hurting and using another person for personal gain. But it was learning that Ed's parents had told him about the DNA match from Ancestry.com that led him to uncover April's true parentage. This was undeniable proof of her long-term affair. Grace now understood that Ed must have realized it was her actions that almost ended their marriage before April was born. At that moment, she knew Ed had been behind what happened the previous night and was exposing the hidden truths of her life. Just as she took another sip of her coffee, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find the neighbor Luke disliked, Mr. Primrose, standing there. "Mr. Primrose," she said, "how can I help you?" He handed her a legal envelope and said, "Your husband, Ed, used my house as a base for his operation against you and your long-term lover last night. I let him because Luke Barrow got my son sentenced to the maximum as a first-time offender. I thought you'd like to know that the information in this envelope is also being sent by courier to everyone on your side of the family this afternoon. Ed wanted me to ask if you're still laughing at him now." Grace watched him walk away with a wide smile on his face. Back in the kitchen, Grace opened the envelope. It was full of pictures. Her letting herself into Luke's house with her key, greeting him at the door, their foreplay in the living room, and images of them undressing each other. The photos showed everything, including intimate acts and their confrontation with the police. Ed's team had been thorough. The evidence was so comprehensive it seemed as if he was working with officers who had their own reasons for wanting to bring Luke down. But it was the final printed page, signed by her husband, that said it all. If it became public, it would create a wave of problems they weren't prepared for. Her plan to force Ed to comply with her wishes was collapsing in the worst possible way. Grace, I knew last Sunday, by the time we got back from Nashville, that you were trying to set me up for divorce. Since then, I've been trying to understand what I did to make your love turn into such pure hate. Now I know why. I see that you hold me responsible for what you think was missing in your life when we only had 2 children. I believe you felt trapped in our marriage and longed for your carefree single days. Otherwise, you wouldn't have willingly turned to him to relive that life. In doing so, you let him take you away from what you resented for a few hours each week. I understand that the only reason you stayed married to a man you hated and saw as dead was that Luke didn't want the burden of raising kids, even his own. You wouldn't have left them with someone you saw as worthless. Your pride wouldn't allow it. This led to a life built on intentional lies. With each day that you both got away with it, your disdain for me grew. I became more of a fool and an idiot in your eyes. How often did Luke and you laugh at the clueless husband? Did you fuel his passion by belittling me or mocking me? What I can't forgive or forget is the message you and the man you consider your real husband have sent to our children. It's something that will impact them for the rest of their lives. What I still don't understand is how much amusement Luke and you found in treating me and our children as mere pawns in your game. The KVOS 12 News reporter summed it up perfectly when he asked whether you and Luke were still laughing at Grace Adams' husband, Edward Adams, now. I watched as Amy, Eric, and April saw the 2 of you reveal your plans for me to the public, thanks to the media. It was painful to see our children witness you both joke and laugh about how easy it would be to bring down the stupid doofus. Eric, our only son, said, "If Mom thinks Dad is just a worthless piece of garbage to be left to dry out and then stomped into the ground, what must she really think of us?" I haven't asked them what kind of relationship they want to have with you moving forward. For now, it seems non-existent. The contempt and disgust you and Luke showed for me have caused that. At least you can find comfort in knowing you've succeeded in leaving me with the reputation of a hapless fool for the rest of my life. Maybe tonight, the 2 of you can toast to that victory. Grace's hands trembled so much that she dropped the paper. She came across as spiteful, bitter, hateful, and cruel, showing no concern for her kids, husband, or anyone else. The only thing she seemed to care about was herself and fulfilling her own desires. Then her sobs broke the silence in the room. Ed had an uncanny ability to dismantle someone's reputation without directly condemning them. No one who read his words could deny the accuracy of his observations about her actions. To Ed, everything she did appeared to be about maintaining her lifestyle rather than love. He must have realized that Luke was the one pressuring her to leave him and the children before she became pregnant with April. Luke's new job had pushed them to accelerate their long-term plans. Originally, they intended to wait until April graduated high school, when her true parentage could be revealed without significant fallout. Ed's letter effectively demonstrated that it was their own actions that proved his words true, and she was no longer laughing now. Ed believed that their disdain for him was why they were trying to ruin him completely. Without explicitly saying so, it was a declaration of war. If he was going down, he would make sure they did too. Grace picked up the divorce petition and continued reading. It was devastating. One of the lawsuits against them was for fraud due to hiding April's true parentage. She was also being accused of emotional and mental abandonment, adultery, and slander. The financial damages being sought in the fraud case made her feel sick. If Ed won, both she and Luke would be financially ruined for a very long time. Ed and his lawyer were proving that he could no longer be treated as the fool they thought he was. Saturday was chaotic for my 2 oldest and me. From early morning until about 4 in the afternoon, family members stopped by. Grace's parents, her 2 brothers, 1 sister, and their spouses came to show their support, each bringing a favorite dish to ensure we had food. Even my brother and sister traveled from out of town to check on me. We were surrounded by love and support. Everyone found it hard to grasp how Grace had managed to deceive them for so long. They all agreed that the evidence from social media clearly showed she was trying to destroy me out of spite. My father-in-law and I took a cold beer, and stepped out onto the back deck for a moment. "Edward, let it go," he said. "Cora is inside to give you some privacy, and will keep everyone away until you've calmed down." He stayed with me until I felt more composed. "Cora and I plan to change our will," he said. "What would have been Grace's share will be split among your 3 children. She's our daughter, but I can't forgive her for what she's become." We had just finished clearing the house when my father called. "April met the lady," he said. "There's definitely a family resemblance." The meeting went well. Mrs. Smith was interested in your family's situation and got April to open up about her feelings. It was good to see because she had been holding it all in. The lawyer took the blood sample he needed and then pulled me aside for a private conversation, my dad said. He asked about Luke Barrow, and I shared what we knew. I found out that Luke's real father is serving a life sentence for killing his lover's husband. Luke would have inherited his biological mother's estate if April hadn't come into her life. "Don't worry, Dad," I said. "Dale Britton has a court order preventing him from coming within 500 feet of any of us. It's been a busy day here, with a lot of family from both sides coming by to show their support. We're staying at Mrs. Smith's estate as her guests. Your mother feels honored by the warm reception," Dad explained. "April is with Mrs. Smith now. We both like her." Her lawyer mentioned it's been a long time since he's seen the grand old lady smile. "Hold on, I'm going to pass the phone to your mom." "Ed, I had some time alone to speak with Beatrice. She asked what kind of son you were, so I shared stories about your life, trying to be as honest as possible. We discussed the events of the past week in detail. She mentioned that you left it to her to explain to April why she wanted to meet. She said it had been a long time since a stranger showed her that much respect, and thanked us for handling the estate matter delicately," my mom said. "Her plan is to leave everything in a trust for April, managed by you until she turns 25. Text me when you leave so I can be home when you arrive," I said before hanging up. I texted April. "We're all missing you and sending our love. Dad." We finally had a moment to tidy up before David and Cheryl arrived with my car. I apologized for not returning it sooner. "The police chief is seeing an opportunity to take down Luke Barrow," Cheryl said. "He and Dale are collaborating. Dale provided some questionable leads for the investigators to dig into." "The office was somber and tense when I got back," David added. "I mentioned that some of us had known about the situation for most of the week and were helping out where we could. It's been an emotional roller coaster here since Thursday night," I said. "The kids are still struggling at times, so I'm taking Monday off as well." "Have you heard from Grace at all?" Cheryl asked. "Not since Thursday night," I replied. "She and Luke are probably busy moving on with their lives, given how they've publicly shown what they think of us." Early Sunday morning, my youngest daughter called to ask if it was okay for her and her grandparents to return home late on Monday. I agreed, as long as her grandparents were fine with it. She thanked me for insisting that she go. I asked her why. April said, "Mrs. Smith helped me accept that it wasn't my fault that my mom's affair brought me into the world. She made it clear, Dad, that we're all innocent victims and don't deserve the consequences of her son's and my mom's actions. I love you, Daddy," she said before ending the call. Amy, Eric, and I watched as my mom and dad pulled into the driveway on Monday evening. They looked exhausted and stressed. As soon as April got out of the car, she ran straight into my arms. I had to admit, it felt good to have my youngest daughter home again. My dad opened the trunk and brought in her suitcase, which Eric promptly took to her room. April, Amy, and Eric went into the family room so April could share stories about meeting her new grandmother, giving my parents and me a moment to catch up. We headed to the kitchen, and as I made a fresh pot of coffee, my parents shared their impressions of Mrs. Beatrice Smith. "She was at peace when we left," my dad said. "It was as if she had reached the point where she was ready to accept her passing. Meeting April and receiving her acceptance meant a lot to her." My mom pulled a legal-sized envelope from her purse and handed it to me, explaining, "This was given to me by her lawyer, as per Beatrice's instructions." I opened the envelope and found a letter and a check for $50,000. The letter was brief and sincere. The grand lady expressed her gratitude for granting her request. She noted that she had already outlived her expected time before I reached out to her. The DNA had confirmed the connection, and she described April as a beautiful young woman who had been raised well. She advised me to use the funds to help navigate the difficult period ahead and to stay true to my values. I let my parents read the letter. It was hard to fathom that we had helped fulfill someone's dying wish. Over coffee, I shared everything that had happened while they were away. I told them I felt the worst was behind us emotionally and that we would return to our normal routine starting the next day. The rest of the week went as smoothly as could be expected. Grace tried contacting each of the kids by phone, but was essentially told not to call again. The corporate head office was thrilled that I was no longer running the sales meetings and began searching for a new sales manager for the first time in 10 years. One day, I was in my office reviewing monthly sales figures when Kathy popped her head in and said, "The news is blown up." I looked up and asked, "What now?" "I got an email saying your last letter to Grace was posted online on the Southeastern Missouri newspaper's website." I checked the site and found it under the Speak Out section. Kathy stood behind me and read over my shoulder. By the time she finished, she was in tears. "I wrote it when I was emotionally raw," I explained. "Maybe I was too harsh." "No, Ed," Kathy said. "You just stated what her long-term behavior showed in an honest and direct way. Either one of them could have ended it and told the truth. Luke got the benefits of a long-term relationship without paying the price." "Exactly," I said. "It's rare for society to see the true impact of someone's actions on their family in such a public way," Kathy said. "For those of us who have been through divorce, it's a stark reminder of the pain and suffering we endured before moving forward." "Look at the last comment," I said, reading it aloud. "As a feminist for most of my life, I have advocated for equality and empowerment. What this woman and her lover did to her husband and children has cast a lasting shadow on our movement." Grace and Luke were at Charlie's Bar and Grill for dinner. Normally, the place would be packed on a Friday night, but tonight there were only empty tables around them. When they asked the waitress why, she explained, "We have people waiting who don't want to be seen sitting near you two. I think it's because most have read your husband's last letter to you, Mrs. Adams, on the Southeast Missourian newspaper's website." Realizing the situation, Grace and Luke quickly asked for the bill and left, knowing they would need to avoid public places for a while. Both were coming to terms with the fact that their actions had drastically changed their world. As they walked out, Grace noticed her parents at a table waiting for their meal. She approached them, with Luke following behind. When she spoke, her father looked up and said, "Mr. Barrow, I suggest you take your mistress and leave, so my wife and I can eat in peace." Grace left the restaurant in tears, finally understanding that once you go too far, there's no turning back. She realized she would have to live with the consequences of her and Luke's actions. Back at Luke's place, they looked up the comments on the website and saw firsthand the public's intense disapproval and disdain for them. 3 months later, I sat in the passenger seat of my car watching April drive. We were on our way to Wichita, Kansas, after learning that her grandmother, Beatrice, had passed away. We were headed to the airport to catch a private plane arranged by the estate. April was taking it hard, as they had grown close through their frequent phone calls since her visit. Amy and Eric had been a huge support, and as a result, the four of us were growing closer as a family. Both of them were encouraging me to start dating again, but I was hesitant. Once burned, twice shy. Luke and Grace had moved to St. Louis. The federal authorities allowed Luke to start his job early, and the county was more than happy to see him go, provided he repaid over $45,000 in questionable expenses. They were now living in a modest 2-bedroom rented apartment, preparing for potential bankruptcy due to the upcoming civil suit. Under Missouri bankruptcy laws, they could only retain up to $10,000 each in equity. Our divorce was settled according to state law. Grace was required to pay child support as long as the kids were in school and cover half of their living expenses if they lived on campus. The civil trial for fraud was set to start in 2 weeks. My kids still refused to speak to their mother, as did her side of the family. Grace had learned the hard way that people will only tolerate so much before walking away for good. April had endured a state-arranged meeting with her biological father. It did not go well for him. April told him that her grandmother had said he was just like his father, a narcissist who shouldn't be around any woman. In front of the Child Services representatives, April declared that both her mother and he were dead to her. We attended April's grandmother's funeral. Afterward, the lawyer revealed the full extent of her inheritance, which was overwhelming for both of us. As the trustee, and after discussing it with April, we decided to sell her grandmother's home along with its contents, except for her personal jewelry and a few photos that April wanted to keep. Back at home, the school year was coming to a close. I was preparing for the first day of court on Wednesday when April came into the den. "Dad, can you arrange a meeting with Luke, Mom, their lawyers, and the 2 of us with Dale on Tuesday?" April asked. "I think so, but why?" I responded. "I want them to see the real cost of what they did," April said. "Grandma Beatrice suggested it to me. I called Dale and we set it up. It was a bright, sunny day when we sat down with Luke, Grace, and their lawyers. I asked for this meeting," April began. "To my biological father, I have this for you. It's the location of your father and his request for you to visit him in prison. He's serving life for killing his lover's husband. You should know that you were conceived as the result of a maltreatment by a distant cousin when she was 14. April handed Luke the sealed envelope with his name on it. The expressions on Luke's and Grace's faces were unforgettable. You both should know that my biological grandmother left me over $100 million in a trust managed by my father, Edward Adams, until I turned 25. Luke, it would have been yours if she hadn't found out about me, April stated. When she learned about my conception and its circumstances, her strong moral principles took over, and that's when she wrote you out. To her, what you both did was disgraceful. Dale Britton, my trust will cover my father's legal expenses, April continued. Luke and Mom, you should consider mediation before going to court because, if necessary, we'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court. Mother, even though you brought me into this world through sin, it doesn't make it acceptable. Thankfully, my biological grandmother helped me understand that my father's sense of morals, principles, and standards is what defines me. I left that meeting feeling both proud and humbled. My daughter had said everything that needed to be said. Whatever happened tomorrow didn't matter, because today I realized I was blessed with what truly mattered.